Hi, I am a data engineer at GlobalMart, which is an e-commerce startup. GlobalMart uses Azure as their cloud providers. Let me talk about a situation I recently faced at work. So we had to create a storage account for GlobalMart, or rather, we wanted to have a storage space on Azure with the following attributes. We wanted read access in the secondary region only during the failovers, and we wanted the account to be cost optimized. So how do I go ahead with this requirement? So I simply went to the Azure portal of my company. This is the homepage of the Azure portal. And I can see that in order to go to any storage accounts that we have already created, I can click on this tab right here. And these are all the accounts that I already have. So in order to create a new one, I can simply click on this plus create page or button, and then I have to fill in a couple of details. So I have to start with resource group. This is just in order to maintain a hygiene around all the services that I'll be creating for one particular use case. So for that particular use case, I will create a separate resource group. Now this is for the storage purpose. So let's create a new resource group for storage. And it might be possible that this is the storage for only the orders data, or maybe the inventory team. So let's call it storage inventory. So this is the new resource group I have created. Now I need to give the name to the storage account. So this needs to follow a couple of rules. I can see that it must be 3 to 24 characters long, and it should only contain lowercase letters and numbers. So in order to do that, I can call it GB, that's for Global Mart, and let's call it INV storage, that is inventory storage or INV store. And after that, I need to select a region. For now, this is East US. That let's keep it like that for now. Most of the data that will go into this storage account is being generated in this location itself. Then I have to give a performance. I'm going for standard for now. And then comes the redundancy. And I could see that there are a couple of options that I have, but I do not have any clue what this redundancy means. So again, if I hover over this button right here and click on learn more, it is redirecting me to a documentation from Microsoft Learn, and this basically talks about different regions and how I can replicate the data into different regions and how the overall redundancy works. So I can see from here that I have four primary options: LRS, GRS, ZRS and GZRS, and here as well I can see those options. So let's dive into all of these things and understand if any of these help with the requirement of global marts. So let's first start with LRS. LRS or locally redundant storage does is that it only works in the primary region. That means data is not replicated in any secondary region at all. So what is this primary region? What is this secondary region? So working with Azure, we have to first select a region in which we want to host our storage account, for example. So let's consider that this was my primary region. And going back, I can see that this primary region I have selected as East US. So basically my storage account would be hosted in the East US region. So depending upon a lot of considerations, this choice can be made, but let's just say that the primary region for now is East US. And this East US region can further be divided into separate availability zones. So let's call this as availability zone 1, This could be availability zone 2 and this is availability zone number 3. When we talk about LRS, we will get 3 synchronous copies of our data within the same data center inside one of the availability zones. So I can see here this is one availability zones, and if this data is replicated in an LRS, that means locally redundant storage, I will get 3 synchronous copies as can be seen here. So these are 3 synchronous copies within one data center inside one availability zone of the primary region. Coming back to the documentation, I can see that it copies the data synchronously 3 times within single physical location in the primary region. Also signified by this diagram right here in the documentation, we can see that we have one data center inside one primary region and we have 3 copies of the data. Now coming to the zone redundant storage, this is again only limited to the primary region. It will not replicate my data into any secondary location. But what is the difference here? The difference being that when we talk about ZRS, the replication is not confined to one data center. So this is basically zone redundant storage or ZRS. So this is still limited to one primary location or one primary region, but only difference is now the data is not limited to one data center or one availability zone. We have 3 different copies of data in 3 availability zones. Again, I am marking them as different availability zones. As you can see here, this is availability zone 1, this is 2 and this is 3, and here I will get one copy of my data into all 3 availability zones. So what is the difference? Even in the case of any disaster, if this entire zone or if this entire availability zone is no longer available to me and this availability zone is no longer accessible, I can still have the data stored in the secondary zone itself. It provides a higher level of disaster management and recovery techniques as compared to LRS, but comparatively it would be. So this is very evident from the documentation. Again, we can see that I have 3 different availability zones, 1, 2 and 3, and 3 different data centers in these zones, and I will have one copy of my data into all of these. Here again, I can see that it copies the data synchronously across 3 different regions and 3 different zones inside the same region. Also, coming back to again ZRS, I can see that it provides excellent performance, low latency and resilience for my data, but it will still not help me if the data again becomes or the region completely becomes inaccessible due to any of the reasons. It could be might be a natural disaster or some sort of man-made calamity, something like that. So in that case, I can see that I have redundancy in secondary region as well, and for that I can have either GRS or Geo-Redundant Storage, or I can also have Geo-Zone-Redundant Storage, that was GZRS. So what is GRS? Let's go ahead and explore. So GRS basically provides LRS in the primary data center or the primary location and LRS in the secondary location as well. So what I have with GRS is that I again have a primary location. In my case, this was again East US, and I will have a secondary location as well. So in case that my primary location is completely not available to me due to any reasons, I can replicate the data in a secondary location as well. So this is one step ahead when it comes to security of the data, when it comes to disaster management, when it comes to recovery, and I can replicate the data into a secondary region as well. So let's just say that I'm replicating it to West US. So with GRS or Geo-Redundant Storage, I will get LRS in the primary region. You can see that I have 3 synchronous copies of my data inside one availability zone, inside one data center, and I will have LRS inside the secondary location as well. So again, I will have 3 copies of my data inside one data center in the secondary location as well. And the data that is present inside the secondary location is asynchronous. These copies are synchronous, but these copies are asynchronous. What does that mean? That means that we will have read-only access on this data, but only in terms of a failover. If this region is available to me, in that case I will not have read access on the secondary location. This secondary location will be available for read operations only and only in terms of a failover. When this region is not available and Microsoft initiates a failover, only in that case I will have read access in the secondary location. Coming back to the documentation, I can see that write operation is first committed to the primary location using LRS, and then the update is replicated asynchronously to the secondary region. And last but not the least is the Geo-Zone-Redundant Storage or GZRS. So in this case, in the primary region, I can have the benefits of ZRS, but in the secondary region, I will only have LRS here as well. So now we have GZRS or Geo-Zone-Redundant Storage. So we have again ZRS in the primary and LRS in the secondary location. So my data would be replicated into 3 different availability zones in 3 different data centers in the primary location. These copies would be synchronous, but in the secondary location I will still have LRS. That means all of the data will have 3 copies inside the same availability zone. So comparing all of these options, I can see that there is high availability of the data, going up to 16 nines in case of GZRS, but even in LRS it's 11 nines, so that is higher availability. I can have availability of write requests or different level of uh, availability for write request. I can have different copies of all of these. But coming back to my requirement, I needed a redundancy that had a cost that would be cost optimized, but it should have read access in the secondary region only during the failovers. So what happens is that because I want secondary region access, I can go for both GRS and GZRS, but because it says cost optimized, it is better to have GRS because out of these 2 options, GRS is more cost optimized because it provides LRS in the primary region and LRS in the secondary region as well. So coming back to the account creation page, I can go for GRS. That would be the optimum option, but I can see that there is one more checkbox here that says make read access to data available. So what does this make read access? Again, going back to the documentation, I can see that there is something for this read access as well. So what is this read access in the secondary region? As we were talking about the GRS and the GZRS, we just discussed that the data is available in the secondary location only in terms of a failover. So this is what we discussed, the read-only access in the secondary region only in terms of failover. So if the primary region is still up and running, I will not be able to have any read access on the data, on the files that are located in the secondary region. But what if I want to say optimize the traffic, consumer traffic, or read operations on my website or on my data storage location, or I want to distribute the read operations on the storage. So in that case, what I can do is I can make this, instead of GRS, I can make this read access GRS. So what a read access GRS will do is it will give me read only operations on the secondary region, including of the times when the primary location is not available. That means even if the primary location is up and running, I would be able to read the data from the secondary location, but I only will be able to read the data. I will not be able to commit any write operations from the secondary or on the secondary location. So again, coming back, I can see that that provides me with two more options, that is GRS and RA-GRS. And when there is a GZRS, I can also convert it to RA-GRS by just clicking on this little checkbox here. So on terms of GZRS, that would be the same thing. I can have a read access on the data in the secondary location even when the primary location is up and running. So again, talking about my problem statement, should I go for GRS or should I go for RA-GRS? So it says here that the data should be provided read access in the secondary region only during the failover. So I do not want the read access when the failover has not been initiated or my primary location is running, because again it will incur additional cost to me. So in that case, coming back, I should not check this box here. And there are some other configurations as well that for now I'm keeping as default, and let's review this. So now the validation has been completed. It took some 1 minute. I can go ahead and create this storage account by clicking on this tab right here. It will again take some 2 minutes to the storage account to be created, but once that, I can just go ahead and use the storage account.